Alright, so the chapter 2 being continued, and this will be the last part of that chapter 2. So, be prepared. Cakes tapped on the Passios. Hey, when do we get down there to fight? This when the other ship sails out, which isn't now, right, Lucio? Passio said. Lucio nodded and they prepared to shoot their guns. Cakes stood next to Apacios and pointed at the gun. What is that? Passios smiled. It's a gun. You've never seen it before, right? Cakes shook his head. Watch it. Apacios aimed it at the incoming enemies and shot it. Luckily, the ball struck one guy's chest and he collapsed down soon after. Keek's mouth came open in shock. Wow! It pierced through his armor! You want to see something more amazing? Apacios said. Keeks looked at Apacios. Yeah. Apacios pulled out the last fireball from his sack and was about to light it up. Lucio grabbed the fireball. No, not now! Apacios flinched. Okay, then when should I throw it? It's not our turn yet. They already have it going on the catapult ship, Lucio said. Suddenly, they all saw a flaming sack flying in the air. What the? Hey, Apacios, did you see that? Keeks said. Apacios nodded. Yeah, I guess the engineers are working hard. He then looked at Lucio. No wonder you stopped me. Lucio nodded. Uh-huh. It'll be such a letdown for Placidus if he saw us trying to be like him. Gosh, that looks amazing! Keeks quickly moved over to the other side to see the catapult. Wow, I've never seen that before. Awesome! After a while, Keeks came back. Apacios and Lucio suddenly sat down to reload. Apacios looked at Keeks. No, Keeks knelt down in front of Apacios. What are you doing? Apacios looked at Keeks. Reloading the gun. I have to reload it before shooting. Keeks examined the black powder and the rod they used to push the stone balls into the gun. Oh, so that's how they look like. Interesting. They then stood up to shoot. They continued the process for many times and started to worry when the soldiers below were struggling to hold on to their defense. Even Seth had to come back and he was staying behind to recover before going back into the fight. Suddenly, Keeks tapped on the Apacios. Look, Officer Ephraim wants us to come to him. Apacios looked and saw that Ephraim was waving his hand to come near, so he immediately climbed down the ladder. Lucio and Keeks followed them, hoping for some excitement. Ephraim nodded upon seeing Apacios approaching fast. Apacios, hand me the siphon right now. Apacios handed it to him. Ephraim pointed to a lone barrel next to the ship. Bring over that barrel. Our comrades are getting hurt. We need to help fast. Keeks and Lucio heard Ephraim's request, and they brought over the barrel. Ephraim nodded in thanks and placed the neck behind Thomas. As usual, Thomas held his ground and resisted any pressure to fall back since he noticed Ephraim preparing something behind. Ephraim stood on top of the barrel and started shooting the siphon. Lucio, have your siphon ready in case mine runs out. The enemies tried to lunge at Ephraim, but they were all stopped by Thomas who kept swinging his halberd. The enemy archers in the back line started shooting, so Ephraim was showered with arrows. However, Ephraim held still and never got down from the barrel, even when the arrows were pounding on him non-stop. Apacios, Lucio, and Keeks were huddled together behind the barrel, watching Ephraim and looking at him as if they were looking at a hero doing his job. Soon, Lucio swapped his siphon with Ephraim's empty siphon and ran back to the ship to refill it. Thomas started losing stamina, and Ephraim quickly noticed it. Thomas, you have your fireball? Thomas continued swinging his halberd and nodded. Seth, Andel, and Edvin came over to help Thomas. Thus, Thomas used such a relief to fall back and take out his fireball. He then looked back at Ephraim. Ephraim, shoot it! Thomas held out his fireball. Ephraim shot the siphon. The flame reached the fireball, and the fire burned on both the ball and Thomas' hand. Thomas was fine since he was wearing gloves and vital parts were protected with a steel layer. Thomas looked at Seth, Andel, and Edvin. Move! They moved, so Thomas threw the fireball straight at the first enemy. The fireball, made of ceramic, shattered due to the impact on the enemy's armored chest. The flames erupted immediately, and Thomas gazed on as the chaos fell on the enemy's ranks. The remaining liquid fell onto the ground and started burning the vegetation. Ephraim worsened the chaos by shooting the last of the contents of the siphon right at the defense gap. Yet still, there wasn't anything big nearby to catch on big fires, so the flames died out by themselves. Ephraim looked back and flinched upon seeing Apasios, Lucio, and Cake still huddling together behind them, watching the battle. "What are you doing? Go back!" Ephraim had never shouted at them like this before. They got so shocked, so they immediately fled back to the ship. Lord Pericles looked on as Thomas' group was doing a wonderful job in fending off the enemies. That guy did have an excellent group. Didn't need much communication to understand what each other needed during battles, and the members in it were balanced all throughout. Easily said, they were multi-purpose soldiers. On top of all that, they were content with how much they were being paid, and oftentimes put in more effort than their money's worth. When the enemies were struggling due to siphon fires, he deemed it so that his soldiers needed to pull back. Lord Pericles lifted up his visor. "Pull back!" He then blew the retreat horn. "Just one more! One more!" Alexios pressured his comrades to shoot before the ship started sailing down the river. Placidus and Constance felt like giving up. The continuous loading and flinging the catapult had exhausted their stamina. Even though Alexios and Carpos switched around the task from time to time, the main muscle force was from Placidus and Constance. "Yeah, this is how it feels when we truly work to contribute. Let's go, Placidus." Constance cheered up his whole group, and they were able to shoot the last volley before the ship set sail. The last volley smashed its way through the lines of enemy soldiers who were still pushing and gave the melee soldiers some relief to retreat safely. "Hey, Alexios, that was perfect aiming." Placidus gazed at fallen enemies. Some of them had their heads smashed, and blood was everywhere that it made a small stream and fed itself into the river. Some melee soldiers approached the engineers. "Thank you, guys. That last shot was a big help." They gave thumbs up and went back to their areas. Placidus looked at the remaining trash sacks. "What do we do now with those?" "We need to keep on shooting when this ship stabilizes. Shoot them all and burn up all the fields so that there will be chaos on the enemies. So, unlike the last time, they won't chase after us," Alexios said. "Men, let's retreat carefully now. Get into the cargo ship by small groups while others continue to defend, proceeding with archers first." Lord Pericles guided his troops to retreat in such a procedure, and at the end, it was just him, Thomas, and Ephraim. They soon looked at each other and at the same time started running. However, Lord Pericles felt something and looked around and saw a giant Turk running against them through the gap intentionally made by the enemy soldiers. Therefore, he raised up his shield in the nick of time to receive the blow. On the other hand, Thomas and Ephraim reached the ship, and it was only then that they realized that Lord Pericles was in trouble, himself fueling a huge Turk. A string of thought raced over Ephraim's mind as he remembered a moment during a horrible night battle, some years ago, in which the Turks had wiped out half of their army. Lord Pericles was cornered by a big Turk back then too, and the fact that he had let the Lord go through the same fate again made his heart rage with anger at himself. Therefore, he started charging back, but was stopped short by a man who ran past him. Another man was about to run past him, but the man paused for a while. "Go into the ship, now! We'll handle this." The man immediately followed the other man in front. Thomas, who was really exhausted, pulled over Ephraim and went into the ship. By then, Lord Pericles was kicked down by the Turk, pushed to the edge of the dock, made to slip, and was about to fall into the river. However, he grabbed onto the edge and tried in all his might to hold on. Even with all the weight of his armor pushing him down, he still held on as a true soldier. Then, the Turk came over to deliver the finishing blow. He was chuckling, enjoying the moment of being seen by all his fellow soldiers while making such a move. He felt someone coming towards him, but everything happened so fast for him to even get a chance to defend. First, he was struck on his chest by the first man, who swung the great sword. Then, he was stabbed multiple times on his lower torso by the second man, who had 2 daggers. So he cried out for help and backed off to try to defend. Unfortunately for that Turk, the first man pierced his mouth, the piercing great sword making the helmet fall off at the end. The rest of the Turks watched everything and they had their mouths open wide in utter shock and severe failure of their hard work. The two men wasted no time during this crucial moment. They immediately pulled Lord Pericles up, one grabbing the left and other grabbing the right arm of the Lord. Then they hastily retreated and got ready to defend against two other big Turks who were charging at them. Lord Pericles insisted on staying, but the two men said no. So Lord Pericles retreated, and the soldiers on top on the ship were awed at how fast Lord Pericles obliged to their demands. For the remaining Turks, they stayed back, thinking that surely the two victors would beat their adversaries. The two men easily dodged the Turks' first attacks. Then one sliced a Turk's stomach, cutting open a deep wound, and the other man delivered a double slice on another Turk's stomach, irritating him. Thus the Turks lunged at their attackers. But one fell into the river since the man easily dodged his attack, and because of the forward force made during the lunge, the big Turk fell. Then the two men went about chopping up the second Turk into pieces. The man with the dagger stabbed and slashed the Turk countless times, all the while dodging every attack while the other man struck from the distance. And when the man with the dagger was satisfied, he motioned at his partner to do the final job. At the end, the other man sliced through the second Turk's neck and made a waterfall of blood. When the second Turk collapsed, the two men immediately ran back to the ship, and the enemies followed them soon afterwards, totally angry at everything that had happened so far. The soldiers on the ship clapped as the two men got on board. However, the two men were rather timid in receiving such praise, and they hastily went about looking for Lord Pericles and soon went into the stern castle. Thomas watched on as they disappeared. Gosh, who are they? They are the diplomats of Lord Pericles, Ephraim said. Okay, so, alright, finally the chapter 2 is done. And, so, in the next video, we'll go on with chapter 3, which is intense changes underway. So, I am pretty much out now. No more, no more stamina left. Okay, so, thank you for listening, and I'll see you next